Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Tracker, Season 1, Episode 6. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So the case that Coulter has this episode is a stolen racehorse, and obviously I do love the kind of switch back and forth of like, well, who did it? Because obviously the main suspect end up being the couples. Obviously, at certain points, you think it's Hugh or him and his currently separated wife Tina, who's already kind of moved on. So it's like, he kind of suspects maybe she's the only one that potentially could have done it. So the story kind of like goes back and forth between those two. But this isn't just like some simple job for Coulter, because things get a little complicated when he runs into a former ally associate friend in the form of Billy, who's kind of like a lot like Coulter. They're cut from the same cloth. It's interesting because Coulter kind of makes it seem like the last job they worked on, which is the only job they worked on, obviously there was kind of something there, but she kind of screwed him over, literally left him holding the bag without the money, and a whole bunch of thugs chasing after him. That's mainly what Vilma I think it's more Teddy than Vilma was kind of pissed about the whole, like, yeah, like, it's not that you didn't get the money, we didn't get our money, because they get a portion of, obviously, the reward and stuff like that. But it's interesting that, and obviously Billy's kind of like, it was 5 years ago, get over it. Which I'm like, no, when you betrayed me, and that's like one of the only interactions I have with you, is like, hey, we worked well together as a team, and you betrayed me 5 years later or not, when I'm working the same case as you, I'm going to feel a certain way. But I just like her flippant attitude about it. But she recognizes, like, she kind of screwed up. But either way, the actress who plays her name is Sophia Pernas, and I was like, I recognize this actress. I wasn't sure. I looked up IMDb. I think the most recent thing I'd seen her in was Quantum Leap, the reboot. She was in the first season. It was probably one of the earliest episodes of the season. But she played the character Carla, and listening to that name, I'm like, wait, isn't that if I'm not mistaken, I believe that's the Bounty Hunter episode, and if I remember correctly, Justin Hartley was in that episode, so I was like, oh, that's kind of a fun, like, reunion for them to kind of, like, be on this together like that. So that's interesting. I hope we get... Billy seems like she's one of those characters that would pop back up. But either way, before we get further, I also saw that I think she's one of the leads in the Blood and Treasure show, which I never saw. I wanted to, I just never got around to. And something else I thought was so interesting when I saw, looking through our IMDb, this is something from like over a decade ago. We're talking about like 13 years ago or something. It's her in Leverage. She played a character named Sister Lupe, which I remember correctly, that's like a season 4 episode. I believe that's the episode they met up with Hurley again, and he was part of something. He got mixed up in something, and he didn't realize, like, he actually thought he was doing good, but he kind of got used. If I remember correctly, I think that's exactly the episode I'm thinking of. That might be the episode that's like, there's 2 episodes that are back to back. One's like the girls' night episode, and then the next episode is the boys' night episode, and this was part of the boys' night episode, if I remember correctly. So I was like, oh, I think, because this name Sister Lupe sounds so familiar that I was like, I think that's exactly I think that's the exact character and episode I'm thinking of. But anyway, tangents and all that aside, something I was going to bring up about the character of Billy, which I think is so interesting. It feels like she's almost like this inverse of Renee when it comes to relationship wise, because like obviously Coulter and Renee hooked up, but he kind of like left her high and dry in a way. It was more so like sadly a hit it and quit it thing. It's like, oh, you just kind of left and didn't really say anything. So Renee feels the way she's felt about it, but obviously her and Coulter have kind of gotten closer. But then like in the inverse of this, it's like, oh, Billy left Coulter high and dry, and yet they kind of got close over this. So it seems like there's an interesting parallel there. I thought was kind of interesting when you really think about it. But either way, I am curious, is it really... Because she was kind of denying it when Coulter was like, oh, I showed you the ropes. I'm the reason why I'm the one that kind of taught you all about this. But obviously she has her way of doing things. She's very solitude worker. She kind of handles a lot of the more like... She has like a whole bunch of like tech and gadgets with her. Not gadgets, but like she has a lot of stuff that kind of help her you know, with the job and stuff like that. Whereas Coulter has his team. He has Teddy, he has Vilma, and he has Bobby. So Which is, I love that he kind of throws it in Billy's face, being like, well, yeah, that's because you literally have no one to call on because you don't have any friends. It's like, we don't know how true that is, but yeah, she is kind of like a lone worker, whereas Coulter isn't. He has a whole team, a whole squad to support him, so. But obviously, Vilma and Teddy were not too happy about Coulter suggesting, like, hey, maybe I should work together with Billy. And they're like, no, that's a very bad idea. But he's like, no, I mean, the fact of the matter, she knows more about this case than she's letting on. So it became hey, let's compare notes. Let's not screw each other over, and let's work this together. It's like, she is just as good as Coulter. So it's like, hey, like, we work this case twice as fast, get the reward twice as fast type of situation. So obviously, the case ended up going beyond just a missing horse. Like I said, you go back and forth where you're thinking, like, well, maybe Hugh had something to do with it. Because initially, you're like, well, Tina doesn't have anything to do with it because her new boyfriend, it's like, they wouldn't have stolen the horse because he made a bet on the horse that was stolen. And it's like, well, if he had stolen a horse, why would he have made bets on the horse? And, that wouldn't make any sense. So they had nothing to do with it. But it's like, is Hugh doing this for, like, an insurance thing? Especially when you find out one of his former employees, Flynn, ended up might have been the one responsible. Because I love that thing of like, okay, we found out like obviously the security cameras were handled the way they are. It's like whoever did this was a pro and kind of an insider, which kind of led to like, well, who was responsible? But the reveal of, all right, but how could someone, even a skilled crew, wouldn't have been able to take this horse, do all this in a matter of like the 3 minutes or so it took the security team to react? It's because all of it was BS. They set up all this stuff to make you think it's this extensive, like, plan, when in actuality, once again, I use this phrase so much, that Kansas City shuffle, you're so busy looking left, you're not noticing what the right hand's doing. I do it all the time. Once again, it's something it's the antithesis of all magic, but that particular phrase in the Kansas City shuffle, I will always credit to the movie Lucky Number 11. That's why I got that specific phrasing. But yeah, it's just, you look left and not see what's going on to the right. So all that like was smoke and mirrors to cover up the fact that they just cut the fence and they rode out with the horse, Arlo. So it's like, oh, like I love that type of deception. I was like, oh, that's so interesting, just like deceiving you over here. Interesting, I would say that too, because there's literally a show called Deception, which was kind of all about that, because you had like an illusionist / magician like helping solve mysteries. It was a short-lived show on ABC. But anyway. But the main guy, the former employee Flynn, who seems like a likely suspect, turns out he was murdered and he's been dead ever since Arlo was stolen. So he was paid to steal the horse, but by the time it was time to make the exchange, he was killed. And so now it's like, all right, so who could have been responsible for this? Hugh or not? And I love the reveal of, well, Hugh had nothing to do with it. Neither did Tina, because we end up finding out the doctor who treats the horses and stuff has a role to play in this too, because it turns out sadly Arlo's been doped up on all these drugs, and so he's not really in a position to be a racehorse, and obviously they've done a lot to kind of cover up this during like they're pumping him full of drugs, which has kind of made him sterile, but also they've been injecting him with steroids, so that's why he's also like so prone to injury, which are like, oh, poor guy, which I think speaks volumes about Billy as a character, where she's not indifferent to the horse. Even she's like, oh, poor guy. Like, she felt legitimately sad. I mean, like, you got to be pretty heartless to be like, I mean, who cares? Like, but I think the way they kind of set Billy up, you almost assume like, oh, she cares about his money. It's like, no, she does care. She does have empathy. She might kind of sometimes can be self-serving and like, oh, I'm just out for me. I mean, it's also kind of in line with their job, their reward. It's like, that's how they make their living, is collecting rewards. So it, makes sense. But I think those are little tiny elements of her character you see kind of shine through that. Yeah, she cares about the horse. That it's like, oh, she constantly referred to him as the poor guy. It's just like, yeah. Like, I mean, you got to be kind of a heartless animal and be like, who cares, right? So I forgot what lead Bobby had that led to them to the barn, but the barn was a trap. Literally, they were left in there to be burned alive. Luckily, they got out of that situation. Like I said, the whole thing did bring Coulter and Billy together. I'm kind of glad they didn't kiss, because I was like, oh, but what about you and Renee? But even then, like, him and Renee, like, it's obvious, like, once again, there's something there, but I think neither one of them, like, it feels like she's about ready to step out on that ledge more than Coulter is, because I think for him, like, obviously the first episode made him realize, like, yeah, I kind of screwed you over. I don't want to make that mistake again. I'm not in a position for a relationship, and you deserve better. You're awesome, Rini, and I recognize that, and I like our friendship and our partnership, but I don't want to ruin that. Like, you know, so I'm kind of glad nothing happened between him and Billy, because I'm like, hey, that leaves room open for there to be something between you and Rini. Like, maybe there could be something there. Like, we'll probably see Rini a lot more than we do Billy. I can't wait for the episode where we get Rini and Billy, and that's going to be interesting. Doesn't seem like, I mean, it never came up in this episode, but it don't seem like Billy and Coulter ever slept together. It was just probably like a thing of he liked her. I don't know if, like, them almost kissing, that might be the closest anything's happened between them. But once again, we they didn't really go over it this episode. Not unless it was some subtext there that I was just kind of missing in that conversation. But yeah, obviously Bobby was able to trace like the money funds to like some shell companies, Cayman Islands type of biz, and it all leads to one of the owners, because there's like 4 owners in general. There's Tina, there's and Hugh. They're the main, like, the actual owners, but then like there's the investors. There's 2 more investors, like Stewart and another dude. Turns out one of the investors, Stewart, is behind this. And yeah, this was all about trying to cover his tracks if it ever got found out about the horse, and he was trying to get the insurance policy. So, but if the horse died, there would have been tests run, and then the insurance policy would have been nil. So yeah, that's what this was all about. I was still kind of waiting for the rug to kind of get pulled over Coulter. You know, he was kind of expecting it when he was like, are we good? And Billy said, yeah. Are we not good? He said, no, we're good. Like, the way they were looking at each other, they were waiting to kind of double cross each other. I didn't think Coulter was going to double cross her. I just thought he was assuming she was going to double cross him. I kind of expected, like, oh, he puts the horse in the back and she immediately takes off type of situation. I thought that's where it was going to go. But nope, Stewart shows up, got a gun to Rini. I mean, if I said Rini, sorry, Billy. And it's like, also, I love the, like, funny bit. It's a hostage situation where, like, he's got a gun to Billy and he's ready to shoot Coulter, and it's like, yeah, there's this funny bit of like, well, how did you see this all working out, Stewart? He's like, well, I'll make it so that you both found Arlo, and because you were so greedy about the reward, you know, it was a murder-suicide situation. And Coulter's like, no one's gonna believe that. He was like, it was a first draft. I'll say that you were trespassing, so I shot you. And it's like, that's not good either. He's like, I don't think you're taking this seriously. I'm like, I don't know why. Like, there's some levity there that I really like. It's kind of a dark bit. It's like, once again, like, there's a gun being pointed at Billy and your lives are being threatened, but you're kind of like, and he's so, like, stoic about it, but he's being so dry and sarcastic while, like, saying like, no one's gonna believe that. Nah, that's not gonna work. I just love that bit. I love that for whatever reason. I was like, that's such a funny thing to kind of interject in that moment. But they ended up taking Stewart down. No harm, no foul. And so yeah, luckily Arlo gets returned to Hugh and Tina. What's also interesting too, because once again, this conversation of rekindling old stuff between Billy and Coulter, it rekindled some stuff between Tina and Hugh. Like, even Hugh was like, right, there's almost a relief that they can never, like, use Arlo in that means of, like, you know, they wanted to use him as kind of like, you know, to have kids, and it's like, oh, like, you know, he'll breed some great horses and stuff like that, but he's sterile, plus he can't race anymore, which they're fine with that, because this horse meant a lot to them. It's something that they bonded over heavily, and even Hugh says he knows things can never go back the way they were between him and Tina. They're separated. They're on their way to divorce. But he's like, at least we can be friends. I mean, it doesn't help that you kind of suspected each other a little bit during the investigation. I mean, she more so was kind of upset because she's like, her biggest thing was Hugh was so focused on Arlo, which she was too, but Tina was able to make time for the relationship. He couldn't. And at the end of this, he kind of learned, like, yeah, I need to take a step back. This had kind of consumed me, and I need to just kind of, you know, take a step back from all of it. So you could tell Tina appreciated it, but it's not like, oh, we're going to get back together. I mean, who knows what the future holds? Like, maybe that could, you know, might not be what it was, but maybe they could find their road back to some semblance of what they had, or maybe it's just like, no, we'll just purely stay platonic friends type of situation going forward. So, I don't know, that was kind of interesting. Obviously, I was kind of waiting for, like I said, for the Billy reveal where, like, she ends up saying, like, because the FBI are involved, basically all funds are frozen, which includes the reward for this case, because it was stuck in escrow until the case was closed, and because of that, neither one of them is getting the prize from it. It'll probably be a while, and not until the investigation's fully done. They've kind of going over everything. Who knows? Maybe even then, I don't know what the end result of that will be. Because it could just be a situation when it's like, no, like the funds will forever be tied up because they're connected to ill-gotten gains and all this stuff. So they'll always be paramount to the case. So there would be no getting those funds ever. Or an investigation could take years. So it might be years before they get the payout type of situation. But I thought we were going to get a reveal where it's like, no, Billy actually did get the money and she's just lying to Coulter. But yeah, they had that whole back and forth of, oh, were you going to betray me? No, I was kind of thinking about it. Were you? It's like, yeah, I thought about it. That's why Stuart caught me off guard because I was distracted. So how are you going to do it? It's like, no, you tell me first. How are you going to do it? But he's like, well, I'll tell you over dinner, the dinner plan she had made. And it's like, oh, I'm already kind of moving on to the next job. And it's like kind of sad because I think she was kind of worried. I think she was kind of a little relieved that, like, okay, nothing happened between her and Coulter. So it's like, right, she's kind of like the solo act, and it's kind of like, just like, once again, they're cut from the same cloth. Like, I think Coulter is probably, on some level, maybe he's kind of glad that she pumped the brakes in that situation, but it's like, I think she's scared of things kind of getting a little, like, oh, like, you know, that might turn into something more, and it's just like, right, I've got this next job lined up, which she had already brought that up early in the episode, so there's truth to that, but, you know, there still could be more, like, she did seem kind of sad and disappointed to kind of feel like, oh, like, I did kind of want the dinner, but, you know, like, we came close to kissing, and I don't know if I'm in that situation right now, like, our fun back and forth is one thing, versus, and maybe some sexual tension, sure, but us, like, potentially anything actually happening, it's probably for the best nothing does. I think that's something Coulter recognizes, but once again, he's also in an interesting spot when it comes to relationships and his lifestyle. It's all about roaming and, you know, being on the road all the time, so it's like, is that conducive to a relationship? Is he in the right headspace to be in a relationship with all of that and that lifestyle? So that's where things are complicated between him and Renee. At least him and Billy, it's like, well, we're kind of cut from the same cloth, so it makes a little more sense. So, yeah, we'll see where the future kind of holds going forward with all this. But, yeah, like I said, great episode, great character introduction to Billy and her relationship with Coulter, and I'm excited to potentially see more of Billy in the future. I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.